It's time for you and me to stand up for ourselves.
Welcome to Unwashed and Unruly, where nothing gets us going like class inequality. Today we're talking about the 2026 World Cup, a festival of profit, exclusion, and political theater. I'm your host, Lola Michaels, joined by Ezra Saeed, our friendly football fanatic. Hey, Ezra.
Oh!
And Cam Cruz, our raucous referee.
Hey, everybody.
Thanks to all our listeners for tuning in while many of you are probably watching the World Cup. And thanks to our very dear friend of the show who gave us our introductory golazo. In case you didn't know already, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pocket Casts, and Good Pods, or on our website, unwashedunruly.com. There's one big problem with the 2026 World Cup. It's being led by two of the most corrupt organizations in the world, the US government and FIFA. Every World Cup has exploitation, cruelty, and corruption, but this time, corporate greed and imperial arrogance reached new heights. FIFA, which awarded Donald Trump the inaugural FIFA Peace Prize, treats the beautiful game as a private asset. Regular people were priced out by astronomical ticket costs, and working-class fans from the semi-colonial world were locked out by visa walls and travel bans. The heart of the cruelty, Iran. The Iranian team had to play in the US on the same day that the American rulers were actively bombing their country. The Iranian players faced constant interrogation, logistical barriers, and harassment. They were treated like security threats instead of athletes. The World Cup, marketed as a mosaic of nations, a festival of unity, is a gruesome corporate spectacle of class power and violence. Despite that, international football is still a rare kind of magic for ordinary people. It's a sport that can stir nations, that lets us borrow the triumphs and heartbreaks of strangers as if they were our own. It gives people something to believe in, and for a little while, something to hope against. So in some ways, you could say this is part 2 of our early episode 4 on race, class, and the beautiful game. And that's when Ezra gave us a really interesting breakdown of how soccer, international football, is run by some of the most ghoulish people who literally buy and sell players in a flesh trade. And we talked in that episode also about how FIFA upholds racist and neo-colonial dynamics in the sport. There have been some pretty insane World Cups in history. A lot of people are calling this one particularly unique. It's been dubbed joyless, the most corrupt and expensive in history. And in some ways that feels like a paradox because more teams are participating than ever before. There's 48 countries. And so just a disclaimer before we start, Ezra mostly uses the term football. We might throw in soccer once in a while. This is kind of a fun fact that I learned recently, that the term soccer is not an American invention. It actually originated in 19th century British university slang. In the 1880s, Oxford and Cambridge students shortened association football to a soccer, and that quickly evolved into soccer. Okay, so Ezra, what makes this World Cup different from the others that came before it?
So every World Cup has some degree of corruption, especially in the last 50 years, massive commercialization, things like that. But then sort of typical American extravagance, they've taken all these things to the nth degree. And it's not just the US. The US is obviously a big part of that, but it's also FIFA, because they see it as a massive money-making scheme. One thing is they've, as you mentioned, expanded it from 32 teams that can qualify to 48 teams, and they said it was in the name of inclusion. And we've gotten some amazing games from some of these teams that may not have been able to make it if not for the expansion. Mm-hmm. Cabo Verde is an example. Haiti is an example. But there's a flip side to this, which is the patronage system that FIFA uses, especially with football federations from poorer countries. And we'll come back to that. It's always kind of done it, or in recent decades, but the current president of FIFA, Gianni Infantino, has taken it to an art form. The other thing he's taken to an art form is the genuflection at the feet of Donald Trump. So you mentioned the FIFA Peace Prize. There's no such thing as a FIFA Peace Prize. It's never
Wait,
existed.
did they make that up? Did they
Yes.
make that up just to give it to Donald Trump?
Exactly. They made it up after Donald Trump was pissed off that he didn't get the Peace Prize. So they said, well, we'll give you the FIFA Peace Prize. It didn't exist last year, and it probably won't exist next year unless they decide to give it to Genghis Khan or something.
But like, I'm also confused too, because FIFA is a soccer organization. Like, what does it even have to do with world peace?
FIFA, like any kind of sport, is deeply intertwined with politics. You can't have sports without politics. And in terms of sports organizations, it's probably the most, no, it is not probably, it is the most powerful in the world. And it has vast connections, vast reaches, and no, it has nothing to do with peace, but, they wanted to make sure that Trump didn't pull off anything weirder than usual in this World Cup. And so Gianni Infantino decided to soothe his ego. By the way, in return, Trump put Gianni Infantino on his board of peace. The guys who are
Oh, how nice.
continuing the destruction of Gaza.
Yeah, I was just going to say, to be fair, like the Nobel Peace Prize has nothing to do with peace either. Like that word doesn't mean anything.
That's
You're
actually
absolutely
true.
right. You're absolutely right. I mean, look at the winner who got it. The woman from Venezuela is a right-wing ghoul.
Counter-revolutionary, yeah.
Yeah. But I'll just mention here that this supposed celebration of brotherhood and all that across national lines under the umbrella of football comes in the context where Israel has killed hundreds of athletes in Gaza and some in the West Bank, including many football players. And what was Gianni Infantino's response to that? Was to make a proposal that the Israel team and the Palestine team play a game against each other in the name of peace. It's like, these
My
are the
God.
most despicable people
That's
on
the
earth.
dumbest thing ever.
Also, your point about this World Cup taking place in the context of war. We're going to talk a lot about Iran in this episode, but also the destruction of Lebanon, the intense fear of domestic ICE raids, and of course, the extreme fan outrage over being locked out by visa bans, by restrictions, and by this predatory pricing. That just creates a totally different landscape. Instead of like, welcome and all this anticipation and revelry, it's just like doom and gloom.
Yeah, there is this quality. The White House has been running Twitter posts and other social media posts with the headline, "Defend the Homeland," as though the other countries coming into the U.S. for the World Cup are invaders.
It's just so fascist. Okay, so you talked about corruption being a central part of this World Cup and that you can't have sports without politics. Going back to the original question, what makes this World Cup different from the others that came before it?
Well, there's a sort of understanding between football fans and FIFA and these various federations, which is, you know what, you want to be corrupt and pocket all this money. That's fine. That's what you do. But at the same time, what you don't do is interfere in the game itself. And what happened this time around is a very blatant, explicit interference in the game itself.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not so much dictated in the first instance, as far as I know, by FIFA, but by the US government. Having established this relationship between Gianni Infantino and Trump, as well as several players, foreign players, as well as maybe some domestic ones, but centrally foreign players, big names like Messi and Ronaldo having been to the White House. Basically, the US government took an incident that happened in one game and used it to assert American dominance, not simply in politics in general, but even over the day-to-day rules of football as the fans understand them. So the incident was, there was a game between the U.S. and Bosnia-Herzegovina, in which the U.S. won pretty easily. But in the course of the game, an American player named Balogun committed a foul that is usually sometimes given as a straight red card, sometimes it's a yellow. It kind of depends on the view of the referee, and it's often seen as a orange, somewhere between red and yellow. And so it was a pretty harsh step on the ankle of a Bosnia-Herzegovina player that looked pretty nasty and could have broken the ankle. The referee did a video review and went to a straight red. Now, when you get a straight red, you get a minimum of 1 game suspension. Usually it's between 1 and 3. If it's a really, really violent foul, it might be more. This wasn't that. But now you can have an opinion that the referee was wrong, that this doesn't deserve the red. You can have an opinion that it did, but that's what the referee decided. And so there are consequences with that. You're expelled from the rest of the game. Then your team plays with one less player, and you have to miss at least one game. And actually, initially, FIFA came out, and the oversight committee came out and said he's suspended for one game. But Trump couldn't let that go. Couldn't have an American player suspended for a game. And he was considered like the leading striker and goal scorer for the US. So he personally called Gianni Infantino to lift the suspension, not even to lift the red card.
Such bullshit.
Yeah.
Man, I don't even care about soccer, but I was so mad about this because the referee's word is law. That's just how sports goes.
Yeah. So the red card is still on the record. It's just to lift the suspension. And then the very next day, FIFA issues a statement saying they're going to lift the suspension. So Balogun can play in the US versus Belgium game. And here is sort of this clear example of politics and sport, which is always the norm, where in this case, a powerful imperialist country said, we want this. And FIFA, being in bed with whoever can grease the skids for them, said, sure, you got it. Rules be damned.
And didn't the UK come and say like, hey, can we get our red cards erased also?
Well, that was a joke that the manager or coach of England did, who's actually a German, Thomas Tuchel, because in the England-Mexico game, there was a young player, Jarell Kwanzaa. He's actually a really good defender. He committed a nasty foul and got a red card. And the funny thing is, Jarell Kwanzaa, right after they lift the game suspension for Balogun, a few days later, they announced that Jarell Kwanzaa is going to be suspended for 2 games. So this is like FIFA saying the U.S., we're going to do whatever they say because they're the U.S.
But and you Britain, guys don't have any clout.
England doesn't really have any clout here. So your player can be suspended for 2 games.
Yeah, you're totally right that like typifies it. And I think if people didn't realize up until this point, the connection between Trump and Infantino and FIFA, like that was just such a clear move. So blatant.
Yeah, and in the end, it didn't matter. I think it kind of fired up the Belgian players who were playing the U.S., and they beat the U.S. pretty handily 4-1. And at the end, we're dancing in mocking imitation of how Trump dances and things like that. It was, I love that. They had a great party, basically, at the expense of the U.S. But it is very indicative of the importance of the World Cup football and the intersection of politics and sport. Just to give you a historical example, this isn't the first time the U.S. intervened to influence a World Cup. This is perhaps the first so openly blatant way to do it. But the 1970 World Cup was held in Mexico. A few years before that, the government of Brazil was overthrown in a coup that brought the military junta to power. That military junta was very pro-U.S., anti-communist, and the U.S. wanted to make sure to give it support and keep it in power. Brazil, in 1970, had an excellent team. We're probably going to win the World Cup anyway, but it was perceived that their biggest opponent along the way would be England. And so on the eve of a game, it wasn't a Brazil versus England game. It was just a game that England was playing against someone else. And one of the knockout games, the CIA had the English goalie poisoned.
Yeah, that's
oh my
so
God.
Crazy.
Wait, are you serious?
I'm dead serious.
Holy shit.
He didn't die, right? He just couldn't
play. No, it was this like food poisoning. The London Guardian or the London Observer, which is part of the London Guardian, did a whole investigation on it. There's a multi-hour podcast about it that they recently released, and it's very interesting. And
it's like a true crime podcast.
Yeah, I mean, because it's like this denial and things like that. Yeah. So it's not, I can't say it's 100% happened, but all indications are that it happened.
This is how your tax dollars are being spent, folks.
Yeah, so, and it was to make sure that Brazil wins the World Cup. I think, like I said, I think Brazil probably would have won it anyway. But the perception was, rightly or wrongly, that England was the strongest team that could be an obstacle to that. And the World Cup is a very important thing in Brazil. And so the CIA gave a helping hand by giving food poison to Gordon Banks, the England goalie, who was a very excellent goalie. And he couldn't play, and England lost and were knocked out. And Brazil won the World Cup. Again, they might have won it anyway, but... So this is not the first time this kind of stuff happens. It's the blatantness and openness of it.
At least they had the decency to poison people behind closed doors. And now they just have the president out here making a speech about how it was a bullshit call and, it shouldn't have been made in the first place.
No, Trump's line is that it wasn't even a foul.
Trump doesn't know anything about soccer.
But exactly. Here, Trump was openly bragging that he made a call to Infantino. And look, I got the suspension reversed.
I think this is why it was so hard for us to decide when to record this initially, because when we were trying to record at the very beginning of the World Cup, it was like, no, there's going to be like we're not going to be able to get all the controversies and all the scandals that happen. And we still have like, a week left.
Yeah. What is new here is the blatantness of this corruption and the openness and the fact that they're not even trying to hide anything. So the prices are insane. The stadiums are being filled, but FIFA is using all these maneuvers to fill them. But the prices are orders of magnitude higher than they were in previous World Cups. So I'll give you a small example. If you're in the group stages, these are the early games. They tend to be sometimes considered the most lackluster games, though sometimes you get the best games there. In Russia in 2018, the Category 1 seats, those are like some of the best seats that you would get, were $210. In Qatar, they were $220. And this time around, they're between $600 and $2,700, depending on the game. So you're not talking about an increase from 210 to 220. You're talking about 3 times to 20 times the cost. It's absurd.
Yeah, that's a huge difference. I heard dynamic pricing was a big problem too.
Yeah. So for the first time ever, FIFA is now the scalper as well as the initial salesperson. So they're now controlling the secondary market as well as the initial market. And they got a great scam going. Every time somebody sells a ticket on the secondary market, FIFA charges a 15% surcharge to both the buyer and the seller. So they're making out great. Some tickets are going on the resale market in the final for over $50,000. And yes, there are rich people that are going to afford these tickets and go to these games, but this is normally seen as a working class sport, and that's who is locked out.
But the American way is to pay a lot. I actually saw that. I don't know if this is true, but I saw some tickets for like $1 million, and like the anchors who were talking about it were like, we don't know if anybody's actually going to buy this, but there was a rich person on the panel, and he said it's a badge of honor to spend $70,000 on those floor seats for the Knicks game, so it's almost like it's the American way, it's a flex.
It's a playground for the ultra wealthy. Like, it's just completely fleecing everyone.
Absolutely. So the prices are so bad that the coach of Scotland, Steve Clarke, Scotland qualified for this World Cup for the first time in almost 30 years. He issued an appeal to Scottish fans. If you can afford to go, great. But if you can't, don't put yourself and your family in debt. Even the cheapest tickets look pretty pricey. So it's insane. And yes, you're right. There are tickets for $1 million, $2 million or something like that. They tend to be the outliers. That's why I didn't mention them. But those $50,000 tickets and all that, it's all part of the Americanization of the sport, to the point that Gianni Infantino described it as something like a Super Bowl. He said, the World Cup, because there's a lot of games, it's like 104 Super Bowls. And so
Gross.
You pay a lot of money to go to the Super Bowl. Normally in football matches, the camera pans to the crowd to show the prettiest women from every country that's playing, to show the guys with weird signs.
The eccentric costumes.
I remember it's very ingrained in my memory in 2014 in the Brazil World Cup, when Brazil was humiliated on home soil by Germany in a 7-1 defeat. The camera would pan to the crowd. And I remember people are crying, and there's this old man holding a replica trophy of the World Cup trophy, and he is just in tears at what's happening. Really funny. But this World Cup, what do you get when you look at the stands? What they keep focusing on are the celebrities, the actors, the kings who are attending, and Gianni Infantino, who somehow manages to make every single game, and it sits on him. Nobody on earth wants to see this guy, but that's where the camera keeps going.
The dynamic pricing thing is really wild, because a lot of this is using machine learning, like AI systems, for creating this demand-based pricing system. But I feel like FIFA just knows that the market is conditioned in this country to accept price gouging, because it's just pretty insane. And like what you said, that it's the first time in history that FIFA is implementing it. So there has to be a correlation there.
And they've said as much. They said the cost of the tickets is in line with American market prices. The problem is they're not in line with Mexican market prices. And the World Cup, while centrally in the US, is also hosted in Mexico and Canada. So I remember the very first game, the stadium had a lot of seats in Mexico. The games where Mexico play, the stadiums are going to be full. But this was the two teams that were playing were not Mexico. And so there were quite a bit of empty seats. And part of the dynamic pricing, too, is when FIFA notices that a game isn't selling very well, they'll sell blocks of seats at low rates at the last minute just to fill up the stadium.
Yeah.
But yeah, what it means is if there's a game that a lot of fans want to go to, those ticket prices will rise.
Yeah, these ticket prices might be at American rate, but I read somewhere that they're equivalent to maybe a yearly salary in Ghana. So it's really prohibitive to fans who want to come see their team play in the US.
You're absolutely right. So part of what happens in a World Cup is you're getting fans from all over the world, including from many countries that are nowhere as wealthy as the US. One of the distinctions of this World Cup is the shutting out of many fans from many parts of the world that the US, in the words of Donald Trump, considers to be shithole countries. So the US has gotten quite a bit of attention on this, but also Canada has been doing it too.
Yeah.
One example of this, like sort of the most clear example, was a referee, a FIFA official referee who was supposed to officiate games at this World Cup from Somalia was literally not allowed to enter the US to do his job.
Wait, what? He was like he's an official?
He is an official of FIFA. His name is Omar Artan. He's a Somali referee. He's recognized as one of the best in Africa, and he was set to referee World Cup games. He had a diplomatic passport, and he completed all the visa hurdles, but the U.S. refused him entry, and the government claimed that he had, quote, associations with suspected members of terror organizations, which is just bullshit. He's a
The
referee.
racism knows no bounds.
No, this is like why everyone's calling it the World Cup of exclusion, because there were such hard lines drawn about who's allowed to come in. So there were 40 countries right now, right, that are under like a full or partial US travel ban. 4 of those countries were in the World Cup. That's Iran, Haiti, the Ivory Coast, and Senegal. And so you had not only fans being outright banned from entering, but you had a wide swath of people's visas being rejected, visa fees that were cost prohibitive, really, really strict screenings. And then, Ezra, you were talking about these security bonds for visitors from certain African nations where they had to pay $15,000.
I don't have any figures for the exclusion rate by the US. I can assure you, virtually no African fans have been allowed to enter. The irony is, on the one hand, they say more African teams have been able to enter the World Cup because of the expansion, but no African fans are allowed to, or virtually no African.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the exclusion rate by Canada has been released. And I think it's probably similar in the US. It might be a little worse in the US. So total visa approvals in Canada for everybody from any country in the world is at 41%, which means 59% were rejected.
Yeah,
now,
that's nuts.
the majority of those rejections are people from African countries. So the rejection rate for Democratic Republic of Congo at 96%. Rejection rate for Kenya at 91%. Ghana, 89%. Nigeria, 86%. Egypt, 59%. And then, as you mentioned, there are countries like Haiti, India, Pakistan, Iran, that just completely outright banned. Even people from Scotland, some of them got banned because they didn't like their social media posts or that they had
the
jobs.
Political. Yeah,
Right.
They were leftists, or they like made one comment about Israel on their social media.
And you have to
really crazy.
Yeah, and you have to bear in mind, especially when you're talking about a poor country like Kenya or Senegal, which qualified, or Capo Verde, your average person from there isn't going to be able to come to the US and watch games, whatever the ticket prices are. We are talking about the elites of those countries that are being
Shut out.
excluded. It's the US telling the elites of these African countries, you're not good enough to enter our soil. And then on top of that is the sort of insanity of just how America works. So there's this picture that went viral of the Senegalese team landing in the US, and then the team being taken to a tarmac where they were patted down by security. These are the players. At a hotel in Dallas, an Egyptian player was taking a picture with a kid who was a fan and his father, and the police nearly started a fight, physical fight, with the coach of the team, screaming at him, "Step back," or something like that.
I saw that video. It was so frustrating. Like, are the same kinds of things happening to, let's say, the Scottish team or the German team?
Not that I know of. What I've seen is more logistical hiccups for those teams, like the English team having their equipment stolen.
Oh, right.
This was right before the World Cup.
Well, these are all like welcome to America signs.
Yeah, which sounds more like a grassroots effort.
Yeah. So it may have very well happened to some of those guys. I don't know. But there's a particular focus on the teams from Africa and, of course, Iran. It's grotesque.
There was one thing before when we were talking about the predatory pricing of this that I discovered that I didn't know before. So I just wanted to mention it because I know we're going to go into like a different direction soon. This idea that the World Cup brings income or a boom to local economies is total bullshit also, because FIFA creates this multi-mile exclusion radius around the stadiums. So local bars, restaurants, and vendors basically cannot show the World Cup or sell anything unless they are actually official corporate FIFA sponsors.
Yes. It's like the Olympics. These things don't really bring that much revenue to the cities or anything like that. If you're a tourist and you're just going to watch the game and there's a bunch of people milling around, like you mentioned, you can't go to the local bar or something like that and watch the game because it is literally illegal. I think they call it the clean zone. The way FIFA does these things is we're going to bring the World Cup to your country. In exchange, we collect all the revenue. There are no taxes on any of the revenue that's being collected. And only corporate sponsors are allowed to sell anything. And so it's a money-making boon for FIFA.
Yeah, but it's like a money-making boon for like 5 people. This is the most vampiric business model. Like you come into a country, everybody has to pay something, and the only people making money are like 5 people. It's so crazy to me.
They say all that money we make, we reinvest into football and football development, particularly in poor countries. And we'll come back to this later.
Yeah.
That's part of the patronage system. So what does the US get out of it? The same thing that any other country gets out of it, which is sort of propaganda exposure. It's the world sport, and it's
Jesus
being
Christ,
hosted
we
here.
don't need any more of that. We already have Trump's Great American Fair. Isn't that
I know.
enough, people?
It's true. It's true.
And don't forget that Trump's meme coin.
Oh, yeah, don't forget about that.
Yeah. Okay, so those things were talked about quite a bit, but I want to pivot to something that really pissed you off, Ezra, that I don't know. I think it pissed off other footy fans, but I don't know how many people are aware of it, like amateurs like us. So this is about hydration breaks. So on the...
Well, hydration is great. Everybody needs water. This sounds like a good thing to me.
Right. So on the surface, great. But then you've been making the point that this literally changes the entire nature of the game and that it has absolutely nothing to do with the well-being of players or hydration and everything to do with ad money. So can you talk about these mandatory hydration breaks and what they're about?
I believe it was started in 2014 by FIFA and its continental confederations. If their players are playing on a really, really hot and humid day, they will introduce, at the discretion of the referee on the ground, a 2 to 3 minute break for players to just get a drink, and then they're back to playing. If it's a nice day or whatever, there's no reason to do any of that because play the damn game. They do something similar in the English Premier League. If during Ramadan, playing a game late in the evening and the sun has set, they will stop the game for like 2 minutes so the Muslim players can gobble something up and breaking their fast. What's unique about this is that it's mandatory hydration breaks. So it doesn't matter whether you're playing in Miami in a 90-degree weather with high humidity and you need something like that, or if you're playing in Seattle in 68-degree weather and it's perfectly fine, or you're playing in an indoor stadium that's air-conditioned. There will be a 3-minute hydration break at the halfway point of each half. And I remember the first time it happened, they cut to commercials. And I'm like, what? You do not do that. You do not cut to commercials in the middle of the half. And yeah, footy fans all over the world were shocked at this. Now, in the US, it's playing on Fox Sport and on Telemundo. Telemundo is purposely not cutting to commercials because part of it is if there's going to be an interaction between the coach and the players, you want to see that. And there are people who do lip reading and things like that. It's insane what people do.
Halftime is part of the game.
Well, but it's not halftime. That's the point. This isn't supposed to happen. So I think in the first or second day when they introduced it, there was literally a scene where a FIFA official was holding the referee back, stopping him from restarting the game because the commercials hadn't finished yet. It's like the level of obscenity and like just commercialization. So it has nothing to do with the welfare of the players, because if it was about the welfare of the players, you just do it on hot days and you don't do it on not hot days. But what it does do is it Americanizes the sport by taking a game that's played in 2 halves where each half will have its own character.
Right.
And turns it into essentially 4 quarters. And it's so conscious that Fox Sports started by calling it a hydration break. Now, they don't even call it that anymore. They just call it the match break. In other words,
Jesus
like it's
Christ.
some natural thing of the game, but it's not, because
They're
part
trying
of
to
what
they're trying to dissociate it from hydration and just like make
Yeah,
it
they're like,
Well, it's more
a
like
part of the format of the game.
the
Yeah.
mask becomes the face. Yeah.
right. And so many times in this very World Cup, you have a team that has momentum, you do a hydration break, and the momentum shifts. Part of the reason it's really pissing off a lot of football fans is you're the manager. You set up your team, you set up your tactics, your system, your opponent's doing the same thing, and you throw the players out there. And for the first half, it's up to the players to figure it out, because it's a clash of systems and the players have to break each other down. And the idea is the players on the ground have to adapt as to what's happening. And you as the manager get the opportunity to make that adaptation because you have a bigger picture of the field at halftime. Where it matters a lot is where you're playing a very strong team, what's considered a very strong team, against a relatively weak team. And a relatively weak team has to rely on a low block, stamina, and cunning, and has to frustrate the stronger team, basically. Has to make it so that the stronger team doesn't know how to break down their defense and all that stuff. You introduce that hydration break, you are turning all that upside down, because now you get the coaches directly intervening to tell the players what to do. And it happened even in the game that everyone's talking about between Cabo Verde and Argentina. The first 25 minutes, Cabo Verde were defending perfectly fine. They had everything covered. They even attacked a couple of times. Comes the hydration break, and within 3 minutes, Argentina scores a goal.
Oh, that sucks.
So it's destroying how the game is played.
Like
by
the momentum, right?
the momentum, the strategies, how you strategize. For 150 years, you've been strategizing this game as two halves.
Right.
And each half has its own character. But American sports is used to quarters, and it's part of Americanizing it with the commercials in between. And this isn't just, and I want to make clear, this isn't just something the US is imposing on FIFA. This is FIFA doing it actively because it's a way for them to break into the American market.
Yeah, but just leave it to the US to turn the commercialism up to 11. It makes sense.
It always happens this way here. And that's why I think for FIFA, it was seen as an opportunity to do all these things, because it's like more money, more money, more money.
Yeah.
And to change the nature of the sport. So it's very annoying.
That was really interesting to me, Ezra, because as someone who like doesn't follow football obviously as closely as you or at all, that the idea that it matches basically what they were trying to do with this World Cup, which is more goals. Instead of it being about the game itself and about all the aspects of the game that are important to watch. And that was a really interesting connection in terms of your point about the Americanization of the sport.
Right. There's a lot of Americans who know football, but there's a lot of Americans who don't. And one of the things you get, well, why is it so hard to score a goal? Why is it only a couple of goals in many minutes or something like that? And this is like, we're going to keep shifting momentum so we can get more goals. And that's part of what FIFA's calculation is. But to anybody who actually likes the game, goals are understood to be the product of a meticulous breakdown of your opponent, a kind of human chess match. Let me give you a small example. Again, going back to Cabo Verde. More people today are talking about how Cabo Verde held Spain, one of the most powerful teams in the world, to a 0-0 draw. That game ended in a 0-0 draw and was infinitely more exciting than Germany defeating Curacao 7-1, where you had 8 goals. Again,
they're also just getting creamed. It's like, who wants?
They're also getting creamed. I watched the France-Norway game. It ended 4-1. It was actually a boring game because France was so dominant and Norway couldn't deal with it. And so the French players kind of just like scored a couple goals and just passed the ball around and then decided, oh, let's try again. Scored a couple more goals and then called it a day. I don't blame them. Sometimes you do that in games because you're saving your energy. But to me, that 0-0 draw with Spain, and it's not just me, it's like that's what people are talking about. They held Spain to a 0-0 draw.
Yeah, a lot of the exciting stuff is not the scoring. It's like what's happening in between.
Yeah, or all the plays that led up to the scoring, figuring out where the weak spot is.
So speaking of playing valiantly, let's talk a little bit about Iran, because Ezra, when you called us the other night and said that the real story with this episode is going to be Iran, I was really happy that you said that, because I think this is a team that faced an incredibly hostile environment, to put it mildly, but also played really, really well. Before we get into some of the aspects of what they had to confront here, I don't fully understand what happened with Austria and Algeria in terms of why they weren't able to make it through. So can you first start with that in a snippet? TLDR.
In a group stage, it's by points. That's why you can have games that are a tie in a group stage. You win a game, you get 3 points. You lose a game, you get 0. You get a draw. Each team gets 1 point. The top 2 teams of each group progress automatically. And then in this 48-team format, there are 8 spots open for the top 8 third-place finishers. So Iran, throughout the day, because the results were coming out not in their favor, kept getting pushed down in the top 8 of the third places. And so they were the last spot. And so then you had a game between Algeria and Austria. If that game produced a winner, then the winner and Iran would progress because the loser would go below Iran in the top rankings of third place. If that game produced a draw, then both teams playing, Algeria and Austria, would progress. And that's why you had that. The game produced a draw, and it is kind of obvious they had a gentleman's agreement for a draw.
To push Iran out.
To push each other forward. I mean, there's an element here where, okay, let's say you're Algeria. Why do you care about Iran? Why aren't you just fighting to win the game? So you can secure your spot to go forward. Or if you're Austria, same thing. Instead, it became clear in the last few minutes because this Algerian player, Riyad Mahrez, gets the ball in a very promising spot. This is after like 35 minutes of both teams just passing the balls to each other, doing absolutely nothing. It was just
killing time.
It was insane. And so he suddenly gets the ball in a promising spot, and he's like, his instincts almost take over, and he scores. And then you see the reaction. He celebrates for a second. His teammates are pissed off at him.
Wow. This is so wild.
I've never seen a team getting pissed off at.
So rigged.
The Austrian bench is running at the Algerian bench like they're going to beat them up because as though they broke the gentleman's agreement.
Boo for sports calculations. Try to win, guys. What is this bullshit?
So I've never seen a player who scores a goal describe his goal as awkward. So what happened is Algeria scores its goal. For about 2 minutes, it looked like Iran's going to go through. And then basically the Algerian defense decides to go to sleep so Austria can score a goal.
Oh, I was just going to ask if they scored on themselves, and they were like, sorry, guys, sorry.
They basically more or less let Austria score, and so it ended in a 3-3 draw. Riyad Mahrez, after the game, described his goal as awkward. So he says, it was a bit awkward, to be honest. We were playing wide and they were sitting, but in the last minute, someone plays a ball, he turns, and I have to make the run. I have to respect football. The ball arrives in front of the keeper and I have to score. I have to try to score. I know it's an awkward situation, but it's football and I have to respect it. And the good thing is, for them, for Austria, is that they scored and they qualify. We both qualify. And that's the most important thing.
Oh my gosh, this is like an open admission.
If that's not an admission of match fixing, I don't know what is.
Jeez, yeah. Totally rigged.
So that's why Iran couldn't go forward.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how the team was treated, starting with the fact that the U.S. is bombing their country and their families were not allowed to come.
Well, families, no fans, nobody. I mean, some of the staff weren't allowed to come. Like you said, I think Iran is the heart of the story because it gets to the capriciousness, banality, and pettiness of both the U.S. and FIFA. And it started well before the first whistle was blown to start an Iranian game. So the U.S. starts bombing Iran in late February. From late February until the present, no Iranian played competitive football because the Iranian league had to be shut down and suspended because of the war. This is on top of, obviously, 3,000 people dead and or more than 3,000 people killed and all that.
Right. So they missed all that training time on top of the trauma and everything.
And competitive playing, which keeps you sharp. And it was actually very prudent that Iran did that. I mean, you have to remember, it's on top of the murder of 168 people at that school in Manab. The U.S. bombed a bunch of teenage girls in a gymnasium practicing volleyball and killed more than 20. And they bombed football stadiums. And then in the months leading up to the World Cup, Trump, Mr. FIFA Peace Prize, was repeatedly threatening the lives of the Iranian players, saying that if they came to the U.S., their lives might be endangered. At one point, he openly and publicly proposed to FIFA and Infantino that Iran be expelled from the tournament, even though they qualified comfortably, and that their place be taken instead by Italy, which didn't qualify.
Wow.
And now, to their credit, the Italian Federation said no. And then for months, the U.S. put up obstacles for the team getting here to play. So they ended up spending months in Turkey doing basic training. They couldn't do it in Iran because of the war. And in the end, the US refused to host the team. They refused to approve visas for them. So instead of staying in their original destination in Arizona, that being their home base was moved to Tijuana in Mexico. Right. Now, they had a great time. The Mexican fans loved them. They welcomed them. They wrote beautiful little notes that they left for the staff and everybody. They were signing autographs. It was great. The problem was all their games were in the US.
Right.
Not in Mexico. And I think they were in LA and Seattle.
That's like a logistical nightmare right there.
Exactly. So the Iranian Federation repeatedly requested that their games be moved to Mexico so they wouldn't have to deal with the US, but FIFA said, fuck off.
Tough luck.
Okay, so now you're going to have to let the Iranian team into the US to play their matches. They had to arrive no earlier than the night before the match so that you don't get that extra day of training and rest before you play. Even worse, they were forced to leave the US immediately after each match. So to give you an example, their match against Egypt ended in Seattle at around 10:30 p.m. They had to be on a plane by midnight, or landed back in Mexico at 4 a.m. There were obviously no cool down exercises, which makes you far more prone to injury. And throughout all their travels, they had to contend with some of the most grotesque behavior by the US. About 14 or 15 members of the team staff in Mexico were simply denied entry to the US. There's a somewhat viral photo of officials from Tijuana watching Iran's matches with some of those coaches and staff members who were not allowed entry. Among them was the president of the Iranian Football Federation. He was not allowed entry. And the head of logistics, which meant that the players and the coaches who were allowed to travel had to do the logistics on their own, including having to fly back right after the game. The captain of the team was twice held up at the airport for several hours for extra searches and questioning. And then in the matches themselves, they had to contend with these rabid Iranian monarchists waving the old flag. FIFA said they were not going to allow the old flag into the stadiums, but of course they allowed it. Supporters of Iran who were waving the Islamic Republic's flag have reported being physically attacked, punched, kicked, women having their headscarves pulled off, objects thrown at them. And it goes on. Usually before and after each game, you have press conferences. And usually at these press conferences, there are questions that press get to ask you. The Iranian team didn't get asked any questions about football. They got asked about the Strait of Hormuz. They got asked about gay pride. They got asked about all these things. Meanwhile, I just have to point out, no American player was ever asked what they thought of Trump, what they thought of the Gaza Holocaust, what they thought of the Iran war, or even what they thought of the despicable and disgraceful treatment of the Iranian team. It's just the Iranians who have to contend with this garbage.
Did anyone speak out about the treatment of the Iranian team?
No. There was a Belgian defender, but he didn't actually speak about the treatment. He just said, this is before the game that Iran played with Belgium, he just said, we obviously feel for them because of all the challenges that they're faced. But absolutely nobody spoke. The Iranian coach, Amir Ghalani, he remarked during one of those press conferences, quote, I ask the other 47 coaches a question, and none of them have responded to me. We are here for football, not politics, and we are saying that again. Our grievances are to the way they've behaved with us. I haven't heard anything from the other coaches of the World Cup. I'm sure they're busy and preparing their own teams, and we never expect them to have a reaction. But if I had seen another team being treated the way we are being treated, I would say something.
Yeah, this is really awful and totally disgusting. And I don't know, maybe I'm naive, but I thought one of the points of international sports was to put our differences aside, to put politics aside and just indulge in the game. So yeah, it's really fucking depressing to see how they were treated.
Didn't Homeland Security Secretary Markwayne Mullin, didn't he also openly celebrate the elimination of Iran?
Yes, once they got eliminated, he said, I danced. In happiness.
So I found the full quote from the Homeland Security Guide. So he was speaking at a briefing at a government special event coordination center in Washington. He said, I'm just glad they're done, speaking about Iran, and they're not coming back. I was so happy when we were able to pull their visas and said they could leave the U.S. soil, and I might have sung a song or two, or maybe even danced a happy dance. I'm very happy they're going back because there wasn't a single team that we dealt with more than them.
What did they do that he feels that way? Jesus Christ.
They're Iranian.
Yeah.
They just came to play.
It's funny. Every game they played 2 in LA, 1 in Seattle. They would leave a handwritten note thanking the city for hosting them. It was so great to be able to play here. Thank you to everybody. They were like the model people And they did the same thing in Mexico. They left all these notes for the staff, thanking them at the hotel where they were staying and all that stuff.
Yeah, I have the text from that also. In Tijuana, they left a note to the locals and said, "You showed us that hosting a FIFA World Cup is about far more than stadiums and tickets. True hosting is about respect, humanity, and dignity. We leave this World Cup with pride, but also with one fundamental question. Did every team truly compete under equal conditions and equal professional standards?"
The answer is no.
Shots fired. Not wrong.
Because on the pitch, in the games, they played really well and fought like hell. And they never actually got defeated in any game. And I will tell you, every call that could possibly go against them went against them. Because in football, there's these fouls that are like, you could say are 50-50. And usually the referee in the course of a game will try to spread out the calls that are the 50-50 calls. Or will say, I'm just not going to call those. Play on. Iran, every call that could possibly be called was called against them. So the German team, for example, was allowed to score a goal against Ecuador after the German attacker literally kicked the Ecuadorian defender in the head with studs first. Meanwhile, the Iranian team had a goal disallowed in each one of their 3 matches for offside violations that amounted to no more than a toenail.
Wow.
So what it meant was, if not for the video referee, every time they scored looking for a reason, any reason to disallow their goals, Iran would have and should have won their game against Belgium and Egypt. They should have won those games without question. The 1-1 draw with New Zealand, I think, was a fair result. But those 2 games, they should have won. And how much of it was planned, how much of it is subconscious, I have no idea. But everything that could go against them went against them. And then the final gut in the punch was the disgraceful behavior
Celebration of their elimination.
Yeah, but also the disgraceful behavior of the Austrian and Algerian teams.
Yeah.
At a future podcast, which we can talk about, not this one, the irony here is Algeria did to Iran what Austria and West Germany did to Algeria at the 1982 World Cup.
To be continued.
And I just want to close this Iran section by reading a quote from the coach, which I think captures the situation that Iran went through. So he says, "To my players in the team, I want to say to them, I am proud of them. What these young people, these players have done, it should be written in history because the host country treated us very unfairly. Had the host country allowed us to arrive 2 weeks earlier, we would have been more prepared. They were reasonable, rational demands. However, they deprived us of that justice."
Let's go back to talking a little bit about FIFA. There were boycotts of the World Cup this year, and a lot of organizations issued statements in the lead up to the tournament, and one of them was the ACLU, which put out a call in defense of immigrant rights and called on FIFA to defend human rights, which I thought was just kind of adorable. Like asking a raccoon to respect your trash can or something.
FIFA, champion of the underdogs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But I was talking to Cam last night about if the average person in the US kind of knows how bad FIFA is, because there were these prominent scandals, right? Like the big one was the 2015 FIFA Gate. And I think a little bit about the voting bribes, like the process of choosing who gets to host a World Cup is just vote buying. But I'm not sure how much people actually know about how much money is stolen and funneled into offshore accounts and how the wealth of FIFA is never used to build these community programs or local clubs in developing nations. And I also learned in the process of this that FIFA is registered in Switzerland as a non-profit association. So it legally sits under the exact same tax status as a neighborhood sports club, which is ridiculous.
Greta Thunberg has the same designation.
Yeah, it's like a bicycle club in Switzerland. It's a Swiss-based organization. It pays no taxes. It's a quote-unquote nonprofit, but it collects a monumental amount of revenue. So 2018 World Cup in Russia, they collected $5.4 billion. 2022 World Cup in Qatar, they collected $7.6 million. And it's estimated they will collect between $12 and $14 billion in this World Cup. So these guys
That's
are
a lot of money for a nonprofit organization.
piles and piles of cash. Yes.
That's complete elite capture right there.
Whatever its origins are, as an organization, it has become basically a way of, it's just a money generation machine. So how does the corruption work? There's bribes and things like that. And that's the 2015 arrests of the former president, Sepp Blatter and others. And then there is actually the legal corruption. What they're doing is not illegal per se, though there's illegalities along the way, but it's part of building a power base because it is a very powerful organization. So Gianni Infantino took over as FIFA president in 2016 after the fall of Sepp Blatter, and he sort of turned it into his little fiefdom. So it used to be, for example, that who hosts the World Cup was chosen by this executive committee of about, 20 or 24 people, all men, in suits and smoking thick cigars and drinking whiskey. And
no, I was just going to say I was surprised by how small the group is because FIFA is, like you said, the biggest sports organization in the world. And it's a handful of people making all of these decisions.
Well, he expanded it. He democratized it, except the democratization was part of the patronage. It's really actually interesting. So yeah, the executive committee is tiny. FIFA itself is huge. It's got over 200 member countries. It has more members than the UN has. And each federation, whether it's the American Federation, the German Federation, or the Curacao Federation, gets one vote. So what these guys figured out eventually is who you really have to appeal to are the poor federations. That's the patronage system. The rich federations are harder to buy because they got money. They don't need your handouts. Mm-hmm. So what they would do is this money that gets collected, some of it will get used for staff and some of it, obviously there's costs to some of this stuff, but the bulk of it goes to what they call development programs. And the amount that they send every year keeps going up. And so we're going to send, however many millions of dollars to Nigeria for football development programs, for women's football, to build stadiums and all that. That's how it's earmarked. So it's nothing illegal there. Now, what happens with that money for real? What happens with that money is maybe some of it will get used for some things, but then you're lining pockets of the Nigerian Football Federation or the whatever football federation, and they now answer to Gianni Infantino. So when Gianni Infantino says, I think the 2034 World Cup should be in Saudi Arabia, which has very little particular logic to it, these poor federations, which are the bulk of them, will, as a bloc, vote in support of Gianni Infantino.
Yeah, because they've bought their loyalty at this point.
Yeah. And so lest you think that the money really goes to the players or to development. Again, some does, but by and large it doesn't. You could look at the situation of the Senegalese team in this World Cup. They're considered, one of the best in Africa, but they were a mess this World Cup. And part of the reason is the coach and the players and the staff hadn't been paid in months. The Senegalese Federation didn't arrange proper training facilities for them. They put them in substandard hotels. So bad that the players themselves were going out to buy food at night on their own. And this is a team competing in the World Cup that's gotten millions from FIFA.
From what I understand, though, the accountability is purposefully very poor so that a lot of people do skim off the top. I know Chuck Blazer had the nickname of Mr. 10% for being, just it's just part of business practice. And you talked a little bit about the 2015 scandal, but yeah, Chuck Blazer was one of the FIFA officials and he ended up wearing a wire for the FBI. And what was really surprising was the bribery was talked about openly. It was a part of their business model. It wasn't really something that was happening secretly in the shadows.
For decades.
Yeah, the idea that Qatar won the 2022 games is so crazy.
Yeah, lots of brown paper envelopes. And some of these officials are fairly cheap to buy. Especially
they're from really poor nations, a lot of these people.
So there's a story that one of them tells where the big guns at FIFA invite them over to Geneva and tell them, oh, we have a presents for you in this other office. And they walk into the other office and they see a bunch of envelopes and each of them has one of their names on there. They open it, it's $27,000. That's an accounting error for FIFA.
Yeah, exactly. Meanwhile, Chuck Blazer has a separate apartment for his cats that cost $6,000 a month.
Yeah, the Chuck Blazer story is hilarious because
funny.
He was running CONCACAF. That's the North American and Caribbean Federation. And instead of getting a salary, he's going to take 10% of everything. And then more on top of that and bribes and everything. Yeah. And he was in Trump Tower.
Yeah, paying $18,000 a month for himself and then an additional $6,000 for his cats to have their own apartment.
An apartment in Trump Tower. But the scene that gets described of him, so he's like this 400-pound guy. He's in his apartment.
He looks like Santa Claus.
Yeah, he's wearing an adult diaper with FBI agents trying to put a wire on him, but and going through a full...
Did they put the wire in the diaper?
They had to keep it hidden, and the only thing they could figure out to do was to use an adult diaper. And yeah, the bribes are spoken of very openly. So the U.S. and Swiss authorities make some arrests. I think the big guys like Sepp Blatter, who was the president at the time, is found not guilty. And some guys take guilty pleas for...
Yeah, a bunch of people got sentences and he got acquitted. Sepp Blatter got acquitted.
But then that led to his downfall, right? Like that's why, yeah.
Yeah, he was taken out as head of FIFA. That was the end of him as head of FIFA. And that's when Gianni Infantino steps in. And his idea of stepping in is, I'm going to reform FIFA to make it transparent and all this stuff. And everybody knows that that's a joke. What he has done is he has generated considerably more revenue than Sepp Blatter was generating. And one of the ways he's done that is by adding more and more competitions, more and more tournaments that are meaningless and nobody watches, or people might watch them, but they don't really care about. But they wear down the players and they just generate more revenue. And they're usually played in Saudi Arabia or something like that. And it's just for money.
It also reminds me of the NBA, how the NBA added a bunch of games and same thing, just trying to generate more income.
What he has also done is this patronage system, which has worked very well for him.
Yeah, so it's like the legal form of racketeering.
It's over the table bribery.
Yeah, buying people's obedience and their votes and everything.
The flip side of this is the U.S. People will often talk about how Russia getting the 2018 World Cup or Qatar getting the 2022 World Cup. Liberals will often talk about, the bribery that went into that. And obviously, there was bribery in both cases. So there's always bribery with the World Cup. There's never not bribery. That's also how the U.S. got it. So Trump himself, during his first regime, which is when the U.S. got it, openly bragged that the U.S. put in a, quote, strong bid to host the World Cup. So he said, it would be a shame if countries that we always support were to lobby against the U.S. bid. Why should we be supporting these countries when they don't support us? A bunch of liberals in Europe in particular were going crazy because there were images of Gianni Infantino standing with Putin and shaking hands in 2018. Nothing that he's done with Putin or the Emir of Qatar comes close to the genuflection to Trump. For the love of God, he created a prize just to stroke Trump's ego.
Stroke his ego, yeah.
And while we're on this, I also wonder if the FBI investigation was retaliation for losing out on the 2022 World Cup. Because I'm would America have investigated if they would have won? They probably would have just swept it under the rug. You
are absolutely right. I firmly believe none of this would have happened if the U.S. had gotten the 22 World Cup. They were so pissed off that they were rebuffed. So they said, well, okay, we'll get Yeah. And I think it's part of the reason they definitely got this World Cup. Remember, 2011, they don't get the World Cup. 2015, they do the arrest. 2016 is when they get this World Cup. So it's...
right after. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we were preparing for this episode, I was listening to a really interesting interview with Kareem Zidane, and he was talking about the 1934 World Cup, which is, if you want to talk about controversial World Cups, because he goes through how FIFA has evolved over the years. This perfect corruption scheme and how they have made all these bedfellows for their financial and political gain. But he talked about how Mussolini in the 34 World Cup, that Mussolini didn't like soccer, he didn't like football at all, but he recognized that it was a tool to unify Italy, this kind of single fascistic identity. And that just made me think so much about this claim about politics being separate from football or whatever is just such a lie because it's been there from the very beginning.
Absolutely. The first World Cup was in 1930 and it was in Uruguay. I don't know very much about what happened there. It was only actually a handful of teams and it was only a handful of games. But the second one was in Italy. And yeah, Mussolini very much saw an opportunity. Whatever his personal thoughts on football is, Italians loved football and were good at it too. They saw it as an opportunity to basically bolster his image and the image of Italy, both domestically and internationally. And a big part of that was the press and FIFA obliging all that, fully knowing this is a fascist regime. This was no secret. Mussolini's been in power almost a decade at this point. That type of obscene nature of FIFA, there's nothing new about it, what we're seeing today. There are examples that are even worse than anything happening now. So, for example, in 1973, Pinochet and his right-wing forces carry out a bloody coup in Chile. 2 months later, FIFA tells the Soviet Union that they had to play Chile in Santiago in the Estadio Nacional to qualify for the World Cup. One of them would qualify.
Okay.
Now, the Estadio Nacional, this is the national stadium in Santiago, was essentially turned into a concentration camp where thousands of socialists and other so-called undesirables were imprisoned, tortured, and executed. The Soviets refused to play there, saying that the stadium was, quote, an arena of execution and torture stained with the blood of the Chilean patriots, close quote. So they demanded a change of venue, and FIFA absolutely refused. FIFA claimed that they inspected the stadium and there were no prisoners there. The inspection literally lasted 10 minutes. They just walked through.
They're like, no blood here.
Yeah.
It's been cleaned up.
So they just moved the prisoners to a particular area of the stadium that they couldn't see them.
Yeah.
And then
underground in cages. Okay, cool. Yeah. Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah. And it was literally 10 minutes that they were there. So the Soviets never showed up for the game. The Chilean players actually wanted to forfeit the game. They didn't want to play it. But FIFA refused to let them and told them that they had to play even without an opponent. And in doing this, they were echoing Pinochet, coup leader and head of Chile. So what happened was 11 Chilean players took the field against nobody. There was no opponent. The crowd was almost entirely made up of a few thousand of Pinochet's troops, armed.
Okay, military. Mm-hmm.
The whole farce lasted about 30 seconds. As the ref blew the whistle to start the game, the Chilean captain, Francisco Valdez, literally just walked the ball over to the other goal, the goal on the other side, and tapped it in. The ref then blew the whistle to end the game. Chile was declared the victor of the game. Yeah. Valdez was later seen puking from both fear and shame.
God. Jesus Christ.
How humiliating.
That's FIFA. That is FIFA. To bring it up more recently, FIFA, after the February 2022 invasion of Ukraine by Russia, within days or a couple of weeks, kicked Russia out of FIFA. That's why there's no Russia in the World Cup.
Whack. And then they did the limited edition Zelensky jerseys too. Fuck that.
Russia usually qualifies. There's no Russia in the World Cup because they kicked them out. Meanwhile, Israel, which is literally carrying out a genocide that every human being on earth can watch in real time, is in FIFA. You know, didn't qualify, but they play in FIFA. And despite many calls to kick them out, there's no plan to do that by FIFA. Their response is always politics and football don't mix.
Right.
But
that's
with Russia, they did. And of course, who's going to touch the U.S., which is also carrying out the genocide while waging war in Iran. That's, again, FIFA.
Yeah.
So regimes all over the world, whether they be democratic or dictatorial, use the World Cup. They want it because they use it not mainly for the revenue, but for the sense of prestige because of how much people love the sport. And Donald Trump is just standing in that tradition. Another example that he's standing in is Argentina, 1978. The military junta, which was executing people in droves and disappearing people and things like that, got the World Cup. And there's this thing in football, which you call the group of death. The group of death is a group that group is usually 4 teams, has 3 or 4 really powerful teams. And only 2 can qualify, you know? So it's called a group of death. Say a group of Argentina, Brazil, Germany, and England. Like, wow, 2 of those are going to be eliminated just at the group stage and only 2 can progress. So that's a term that gets used. So Argentina in the 1978 World Cup has the first game and barely win. And a general goes up to the Argentine captain after the game and says, you know, you are literally in a group of death.
Oh, okay.
You better win or else.
Jeez.
It's like the Hunger Games. This is crazy.
Now, maybe there was also match fixing or whatever, because Argentina did win. That was the first World Cup they won, but they were a very good team. But yeah, he was like, you win or you are in the group of death.
Okay. So what you're seeing in the last few weeks of the tournament is people have a lot more than just personal stakes, obviously. These are national stakes, right? This is very ancestral. It's a loyalty that comes with an anti-colonial struggle or anti-racist struggle, deeply political struggle that goes way beyond the final numbers. And that's why people get so mad when it seems like there's any indication of match fixing or when a team seems to be being pushed ahead in the tournament.
Yeah. And if you've been on social media at all over the last week or more, you will have seen that Argentina has become everybody's bogeyman right now. And with some legitimacy. I mean, I have personally reached the point where, like, I don't care who wins the World Cup anymore. I just want Argentina out. And normally I reserve that line for England, not Argentina. You know, a tournament begins and everybody's talking about Argentina as a favorite to win it. I think with some legitimacy. But then you had a couple of games once Argentina starts getting into the knockout phases, where there's just this unmistakable directionality to where all the referee calls are going.
Mm-hmm.
The Cape Verde game was kind of the first hint of it, where Cape Verde came very close to winning, but there was just like weird calls that tended to always fall in favor of Argentina that made it even harder. And then the big one was the Egypt game. That game, just in a similar way to the Cape Verde game, I think Argentina went in thinking this should be an easy game, and far from it. Egypt, towards the end of the second half, was winning 2-0. Now, there are two things that happen at the same time, in my opinion. One being, this is a perennial problem with teams from Africa. And I think it's that old saying that oppression oppresses. You sort of internalize the inferiority complex that
that you're like lower on the rung,
right.
that you're
And Egypt wasn't the only one. Senegal was playing a game against Belgium. We're leading 2-0 with like 10 or 15 minutes to play, and then just collapsed and lost 3-2. Almost as though you're not supposed to be doing this. And I think there's an element of that happened with Egypt, where in the last 15 minutes, Argentina made it 3-2. But it was so clear that the refs were doing everything to, let's say, bend the stick in that direction. I don't know that I can demonstrate outright match fixing, but there's some weird calls, including a beautiful goal, probably the best team goal in the tournament so far that Egypt scored, which was disallowed because of a very soft foul that happened 30 seconds before the goal, not by the player who ran the ball forward, not by the player who did the assist, and not by the player who scored the goal. They were going back to the time of the pharaohs to figure out a way to disallow that goal. And it just kept going like that. There were clear penalty shouts for the Egyptian team that weren't called, that were not even reviewed. So now the video review has the plausible deniability. Well, we didn't review it. Well, maybe if we did, we would have called it, but we didn't review it. And so now why Argentina?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. So how much of this is the Messi effect? You know, that Messi is playing on that Argentina team. He's obviously plays for the US regularly. And so like how much of that is the ties between the US and the Argentinian regime and the Israeli regime?
I think Messi is part of it, but I think there's more to the story. Messi gained his fame as an amazing footballer, and he is, playing for Barcelona. But, you know, in the last couple of years, he's been playing for Inter Miami. And in some ways, he has become the face of football for millions of Americans. So I think there's a financial aspect in making sure that the thing that gets Americans to keep watching and keep the viewership up
is the GOAT.
Yeah, is having Argentina and Messi stay in the tournament. Remember, money is a huge part of this. The minute they're knocked out, the ratings are going to go down. But I think there's more to it. I mentioned earlier the U.S. poisoning an English goalie to help Brazil. Don't forget who the ruler of Argentina is. A Trump favorite, ultra-Zionist.
Yeah.
Javier Milei, and this would hand him a victory. If Argentina were to, for example, walk away with the trophy, Messi himself, who I think tends to be on the right wing of politics, very much unlike Maradona, has been, I don't want to say regular, but has been a semi-regular feature in White House events, usually with Trump and Infantino. So there is a political element here too, if you sort of accept that framework that some nefarious things are happening on the football pitch of the U.S. wanting to help their buddy in Argentina. And what was really funny is right after this Egypt-Argentina game and all the social media uproar over it, Netanyahu comes out with a statement saying, my team in the World Cup is Argentina.
I know, which is, that's kind of the whole point, is that if they do win, there's going to be a lot of hatred for Argentina, and it's going to really contradict the excitement in the country among the working class masses in that country that are going to see it as national pride, except other people are going to see it as a symbol of dictatorship winning and Trump's cronies and Israel winning, basically.
On the one hand, in 2022, 4 years ago, there was a high degree of goodwill towards not so much Argentina, but Messi. He's won everything except the World Cup. And so this was, okay, yay, Messi finally got his World Cup. I think all that is gone now. And I think a big part of it is the sense that everything is happening on the field is to kind of push everything that's favorable to Argentina. But I think there's also this sort of association between Argentina and Israel and obviously the United States, and an equation between the Argentine populace and working class and the ruling class. Remember, 2022 is before the Gaza genocide had started.
Yeah.
Whereas now, Argentina is basically viewed as Israel's staunchest ally in South America.
Right.
And you have Javier Milei literally weeping at the Wailing Wall and openly saying that he believes he's the most Zionist president on earth. But meanwhile, in Argentina itself, contrast the image of 5 million Argentines flooding the streets of Buenos Aires to celebrate the 2022 victory with the economic dislocation that has been suffered by the Argentine populace, to the point that the neoliberal leadership of that country is now promoting the virtue of eating donkey meat to a populace that is suffering. So I just would urge anyone, whatever you think of the games or any of that stuff, just in general, do not equate a population with its ruling class. Those are two very different things, because I want the Argentine working class to sweep away these vicious, right-wing, murderous Zionist fucks.
It's so sad and infuriating that a tournament with so much weight and so much meaning to so many people is shaped by exploitation and exclusion and political cruelty at every single level, where the workers, the fans, and whole teams are treated as disposable. So yeah, I think one of the things that in all your commentary to me over the last several weeks, multiple text messages a day following each match, which I appreciate, but couldn't really keep up. But one of the things that was meaningful to me about your messages was like how much these athletes kept showing up and kept competing and giving you as a footy fan like these moments of joy and fascination and adoration and admiration, even under these conditions that they didn't choose. And so, yeah, like hats off to all of them for carrying the spirit of the game forward. And it is really nice to hear people impressed by how players play, even if a team loses, because it shows that there is such a deep recognition of the art and the sport in that really authentic way.
It's very hard to capture, especially to an American audience, the passion that football elicits. And if there's any theme to take out of this podcast, is that politics and football, politics and sports very much mix. So one of the things that happens in a World Cup is you have dominant imperialist powers playing against the semi-colonial countries. Mm-hmm. In some cases, the colonists playing against their former colony. And the politics very much enter that. So Algeria defeating West Germany in the 1982 World Cup was like hailed by many around the world as a humiliation of the haughty Europeans by an African country. In 1966, when North Korea, in a huge upset, defeated Italy, massive upset that no one thought coming, to this day, South Korean fans, when they play Italy, they will start chanting, remember 1966, remember 1966.
Oh, wow.
I love that.
Breaking down the class line, the class barrier even.
I remember vividly, personally, being in a bar in 2002 when Senegal defeated France, its former colonial overlord.
Yeah.
And again, none of this is rational, because none of this,
changes the conditions of
anybody, nor is it like defeating the imperialist power. But there are like these little markers for people in the semi-colonial world where they recall an assertion of dominance, an assertion of cunning, character, determination, and intelligence by the victims against their oppressors. There's this old saying, you can change your religion, you can change your nationality, you can change your political party or affiliation, but you can never change your football club. And it is so difficult to convey those passions to somebody who doesn't understand it.
Yeah.
And part of it comes because it's a very simple sport, an everyman sport. You don't even need a ball to play. Rolled up socks, and you can play the game.
That's how you used to play, right?
Yeah, it's like a tangible religion. Football clubs are defined not just by their geographic location, but also by the social base that supports them. So Real Madrid was supported by Franco, Barcelona is by Catalans, Lazio in Italy is supported by fascists, Roma by Italian communists. Teams like Manchester United and Liverpool have a heavily working class base. Fulham in London is known as unashamedly posh. Nottingham Forest, imagine this. You play for a team called Nottingham Forest in England. Most of the players are not from Nottinghamshire. A lot of them are from other countries or other parts of England. You really have no connection to the region. But to this day, it gets called a team of scabs. especially in northern England, because the Nottinghamshire miners refused to join the strike in the 1984-85 Great Miner Strike in England.
Man, these soccer fans really hold grudges.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's part of it's just part of the identity of the person. Like, there's this great former manager, late manager now, Bill Shankly. He once said, some people think that football is a matter of life and death. It's much more important than that. And so it's a religion, but it's also a religion in the sense that it's an opium of the people. It's an escape. It's part of bread and circuses that the ruling classes use to lull people, especially the proles. And its best players come from the slums, the council estates, the banlieues, and the favelas. But these are the people who are mostly going to be priced out of it on both the international and the national level. And it has nothing to do with rationality. The intense emotion and fanaticism that comes with the game, it is not rational in any way, shape, or form. And then every 4 years, people temporarily put aside their club allegiances to focus entirely on the World Cup spectacle. For powerhouse countries like Brazil, Argentina, and Germany, it's a way to not only relive the past glories, but to escape the misery of the present.
Yeah, that's why it feels always contradictory to me. Like very
it is
understandably celebratory, but also really sad, because that kind of pride and belonging, it doesn't translate to a transformation of the material conditions.
It's absolutely that, because I'll say again, it has nothing to do with what's sensible or rational. And sometimes it has little to do with what's happening on the football field itself.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, it goes way beyond the field. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you really struck at one of the reasons that it's so emotional for people, and that's because a lot of the best players come from the slums, right? And as an oppressed class, you're always being told that you're less, that you don't have as much worth. But when you can prove that you are the best of the best that comes from nothing, it upends that narrative. And I think that's one of the things that really inspires people about soccer.
To use Gaza as an example, the MO for Israel is if a large crowd of people gather in Gaza, they're just going to bomb them. And nonetheless, people have been organizing watch parties. And yes, they have been getting killed. So a case that has been talked about some over the last week or so has been the murder of Mohammed al-Wahidi, who is a Palestinian who worked as part of the Egyptian Relief Committee in Gaza. He had organized a viewing party of the Argentina-Egypt game. And about 2 minutes into the game, Israel launched a strike and killed him along with 3 other Palestinians.
So awful.
Yeah. And this is part of what happens. And I just also have to add a little aside here, because the Egyptian government, I'm sure, issued statements condemning or whatever, because, he worked for an Egyptian organization. But I just want to make it clear. A report came out, the Middle East Eye News, that when that game was being played, Egyptian and Israeli military officers were watching it together, like friendly. This is the state of the Middle East. This is the state of the betrayal of the Palestinian people in general. And so even in these horrific, dire circumstances, there's a glitter. I don't want to say it's a glimmer of hope, because it's not. It's more of an escape that they find temporary for like 90 minutes. But even those 90 minutes are too long for Israel to give these people as an escape.
It's insane that with everything going on in Palestine, that they're still identifying with these players and how much it means to them to watch these games.
It's a
defiance too.
Yes. You see yourself in the players. You see yourself in their success. You see yourself in their failure. There's a manager, Jurgen Klopp, who says, if you're going to lose beautifully. That's why the people who are going on and on about Cabo Verde are not from there. They're not, but they see in the underdog themselves. They see it in the success and the failure. A crowd that acts and thinks like you, that sort of herd mentality, the underdog David slaying the Goliath.
Yeah. There's so much social psychology behind it. Yeah.
And it's impossible to capture. So there was an English footballer named Jimmy Greaves, and he became a TV pundit. And years later, after becoming a pundit, he's being asked all these questions about football, about its unpredictable, bizarre, and illogical nature of the game and of its fans. And he just looked at the guy asking him this and said, football's a funny old game.
Yeah.
It is.
All right. So who did we punch up to in this episode, Ezra?
I'd say it's FIFA.
Yeah. You agree, Cam?
I'm going to say that this episode we punched up to planned draws. Guys, fucking planned draws suck. It's against the integrity of the game, and you're making these players abandon their integrity for political and racist reasons, and it's bullshit. Fuck these planned draws.
Amen.
Okay.
Can we do some sort of hand of God pun? Do we have a hand of God pun ready?
Oh, wow. So the last episode we did on football, we talked about one of my favorite players of all time, the late, great Diego Maradona, who was both an amazing footballer and a lefty, and his famous hand of God goal against England in 1986, which Scottish people still celebrate to this day, which was immediately followed by one of the best goals you'll ever see in your life. So this is from an interview that Diego Maradona did in 2018 in response to somebody asking him about the US winning the bid to host the World Cup in 2026. And he says, "They will divide the game into 4 halves instead of 2 to insert advertisements. You will see." And the man called it.
Maradona Damas.
But we don't love anybody who doesn't love us.
Thanks for listening to Unwashed and Unruly. If you need us, we'll be hosting our own footy game in the yard where tickets are free and hydration breaks are just drinking from the garden hose. Catch you later.